Lila Sterling had always believed that a gentleman's family name mattered more than his face, until a midnight kiss with a man whose identity was cloaked in black velvet taught her that a secret connection could be far more dangerous than any known enemy. Part 1. The Masked Encounter. The air in the ballroom of Lord Ashworth's estate was thick with the scent of beeswax and lilies, thick with the rustle of silks and the low murmur of fashionable gossip, and most potently, thick with a barely contained electricity. It was the most anticipated masked ball of the season, a night where the rigid boundaries of London society were momentarily blurred by velvet and lace, allowing for a freedom more intoxicating than the champagne flowing from the silver bowls. Miss Lila Sterling, witty and independent by nature, found the entire affair both ridiculous and necessary. Her mask, a simple confection of black lace that left her mouth and the sharp angles of her chin exposed, was a merciful barrier. It allowed her to observe the marriage market unfolding around her. The earnest daughters, the predatory mamas, and the indifferent bachelors. She possessed a dazzling countenance and a mind sharper than most gentlemen preferred, a combination that made her highly sought after and, frustratingly, often misunderstood. She did not wish to be a piece of property exchanged for a higher dowry. She wished for a life of purpose, perhaps even a life governed by something as reckless as passion. She had just retreated to a quiet alcove near the conservatory, weary of repelling the 10th hopeful gentleman who believed a poetic compliment about her slipper would win her favor, when he appeared. He was tall, undeniably so, and moved with a quiet, almost dangerous grace that seemed entirely out of place amidst the prancing of the ton. His coat was a deep midnight blue, impeccably tailored, and his mask was less a disguise than a deliberate shadowing of his features, dark silk covering the bridge of his nose and the powerful sculpted brow. The rest of him, the uncompromising set of his jaw, the firm line of his mouth, and the glint of his eyes, a color she could not quite discern in the dim light, but sensed was intense, was left bare. Lila felt an immediate, inexplicable catch in her breath, the kind that had nothing to do with decorum and everything to do with instinct. He did not rush, did not speak an overly familiar word. He simply stopped, a respectable distance from her, and looked. It was not the appraisal of a suitor, but the direct, unblinking assessment of a man who saw past the lace and the ball gown to the woman beneath. "You appear to be escaping, miss," he said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that bypassed her ears entirely and vibrated somewhere in the vicinity of her heart. Lila, unaccustomed to being rendered speechless, recovered her wit quickly. "And you, sir, appear to be aiding my escape. I am grateful for the silent partnership." He offered a half-smile that transformed his face, chasing the severe shadow from his features and hinting at a reckless charm. "I find these proceedings tiresome. The masks are meant to afford a measure of anonymity, yet everyone behaves precisely as they do when unmasked, preening and proclaiming their consequence, except for you." "And you," Lila countered, a playful fire lighting in her own eyes. "Tell me, who are you escaping from? A persistent aunt? A looming fiancé?" "My own expectations, perhaps," he admitted, stepping closer, until the distance between them felt charged, like the space before a brewing storm. "Or perhaps I was simply searching for someone who possessed an honest desire to see without judgment." His gaze locked with hers, and in that moment the entire enormous ballroom, the chandeliers, the orchestra, the hundreds of people, shrank to a single vibrant point: them. There was an immediate understanding, an undeniable kinship that felt as though they had known each other for years, not minutes. It was the thrill of the forbidden, the sheer intoxicating wickedness of connecting on this profound level with a complete stranger. I find myself intensely curious about the man behind the mask, she confessed, the words barely a whisper. The polite boundaries she rigorously maintained felt as thin and fragile as a moth's wing. And I, the lady who hides a fire in her spirit behind the guise of impeccable refinement. His fingers lifted, hovering for a moment, before gently tilting her chin up. It was an intimate gesture, one that would ruin her reputation if witnessed, yet it felt utterly natural, inevitable. "Should we unveil?" she challenged, her heart beating a wild, frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Not yet," he said, his eyes darkening. "The magic is in the unknown, in this solitary hour stolen from the dictates of society. When the identities are revealed, the demands begin. The family names, the properties, the connections, the politics, all the tiresome noise of the world comes flooding in. For now, there is only us." He was eloquent, passionate, and dangerously honest. He spoke to the deep well of yearning in her that no suitor had ever managed to reach, the desire for a true, unfettered connection. The clock in the main hall began to chime, a deep, sonorous toll marking the end of the evening's peak. Midnight. He did not ask permission. He did not need to. The moment had been building from the second their eyes met. His hand cupped the back of her head, his touch firm yet tender, and he closed the remaining distance. The kiss was utterly consuming. It was not a polite society peck, nor a clumsy, juvenile attempt. It was a deep, passionate exploration, a silent vow exchanged between two souls who had stumbled upon their twin in the most unlikely of places. It was fire and velvet, desperate and inevitable. Lila clung to his shoulders, her mind delightfully blank, consumed only by the taste of him, the scent of expensive cologne and something uniquely masculine, and the thrilling knowledge that she was doing something utterly, wonderfully reckless. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing heavily, their masks askew, their world momentarily tilted off its axis. "I must know your name," Lila whispered, dizzy from the intensity of the moment. He pressed his thumb gently to her lower lip, his gaze holding hers captive. "We will meet again. You will know my name soon enough, but let this moment remain pristine. I promise you this, miss, with all that I am, I will find you, and when I do, I pray the noise of the world does not shatter the truth of this night." "A promise, then?" she agreed, already missing the solid warmth of his body. "But promise me this too, you will not delay. I have a terrible feeling that my world is about to become very loud." He nodded, a fleeting, tender smile touching his lips. "I understand." And then, with a final, lingering look that promised everything, he was gone, melting into the crowd as the music swelled for the final waltz. Lila leaned back against the cool marble, her body still humming, her fingers instinctively touching her lips. Alexander Vance, the name she did not know, yet knew in the depth of her spirit. She felt utterly reborn, consumed by the thrilling certainty that she had just met her destiny, and it tasted of midnight and reckless hope. The morning sunlight, usually a welcome sight, felt harsh and unforgiving. Lila sat at the breakfast table of Sterling House, her mother, a woman of gentle temperament but firm societal ambition, fussing over the arrangement of the silver, and her father, Mr. Elias Sterling, looking unusually stern behind his morning copy of the Times. Lila was still slightly dizzy from the events of the previous night, The memory of the masked stranger, the low timbre of his voice, and the exquisite, forbidden kiss was a secret fire burning beneath her impeccable morning gown. She was eager, almost frantic for the day to begin, for the gentleman to seek her out, to discover the name that had taken her heart captive. Her father cleared his throat, a sound that always signaled the end of casual conversation and the beginning of a serious address. "Lila, my dear," Mr. Sterling began, folding the newspaper with unnerving precision, "I have settled a matter that has been weighing heavily upon my mind, and I wish to inform you before the official announcement is made public." Lila's fork clattered softly onto her porcelain plate. Her chest tightened with a premonition of dread. "This season has been highly successful, and while you have conducted yourself with distinction, I believe it is time to secure your future. After much deliberation and negotiation, I have accepted an offer from Lord Ashworth." Lila stared at him, the color draining from her face. Lord Ashworth was a perfectly acceptable gentleman, wealthy, titled, and utterly devoid of passion or imagination. He was a solid match, a political alliance, and the absolute antithesis of the man she had met mere hours ago. "Father," she managed, her voice trembling slightly, "what are you saying?" "I am saying, child, that you are to be married to Lord Ashworth before the autumn. The settlements are generous, the estates contiguous with ours, a sound match in every respect. It secures your position and strengthens the Sterling name immeasurably. I have given my word." The phrase, "I have given my word," echoed in the dining room with the cold, absolute finality of a judge's gavel. Lila felt a wave of cold despair wash over the ecstatic warmth of the night before. She was to be married, arranged, her future sealed, bargained for, and settled. And the man she loved, the man who had promised to find her, did not even know her name, let alone the impossible wall that had just been erected between them. The memory of the midnight kiss now felt not like a promise of bliss, but like a desperate, defiant act of treason against her own impending fate. Her heart, which had flown free the night before, now felt imprisoned in her chest, a terrified, beating bird trapped behind the heavy, unforgiving bars of duty and convenience. Her world had indeed become loud, deafeningly so, and the man who was meant to be her destiny was a phantom, and she was already betrothed to another. Part 2. The Cruel Reveal. Lila woke on the morning following her father's announcement, feeling as though she had endured a long, miserable illness. The joy and intoxicating mystery of the masked ball had curdled into a cold dread, and the small, delicate sapphire ring that Lord Ashworth had presented, a token of their official engagement, felt like a manacle on her finger. It was beautiful, undeniably expensive, and utterly, damningly wrong. The drawing rooms of Sterling House were suddenly filled with florid notes of congratulations, visits from beaming relatives, and the meticulous preparations for an accelerated wedding date. Every hour spent discussing damask linens and the composition of the wedding breakfast was an hour spent suffocating the memory of the man who had promised to find her. He had promised to find her. But now, when he did, he would find Miss Lila Sterling, fiancée of Lord Ashworth. The thought was a sharp, twisting pain. Desperate for a moment's respite from the oppressive cheerfulness of her mother and the business-like smugness of her father, Lila ordered the carriage to take her to the sprawling public elegance of Kensington Gardens. She needed air, solitude, and, perhaps, a final, desperate chance to walk amongst the common populace before her life became entirely encased in the gilded cage of a titled lady. She chose a quiet, secluded path that skirted the Serpentine, a path usually favored only by nurses and quiet scholars. She walked briskly, her mind whirling between duty and desire, honor and the fierce, defiant hope that still pulsed beneath the sapphire ring. She was so consumed by her internal war that she nearly collided with a gentleman who had paused by an ancient oak, seemingly lost in contemplation of the water. "Pardon me, sir," Lila murmured, stepping quickly aside. The gentleman turned. The world stopped. It was him. His mask was gone, but the uncompromising set of his jaw, the severe yet beautifully sculpted lines of his face, and the piercing intensity of his eyes were unmistakable. In the clear, unforgiving light of the day, his eyes were revealed to be a striking, unforgettable shade of deep storm gray. He too froze, his expression transitioning through a rapid sequence of recognition, astonishment, and finally a devastating, slow-dawning horror. Miss Sterling," he breathed, his rich voice now edged with a raw, disbelieving shock. He knew her name. He had recognized her not merely as an acquaintance, but as the woman from the ball. His recognition was confirmation that the magic of the night before had been real, but his reaction was a premonition of ruin. Lila felt a fierce, overwhelming joy that was immediately obliterated by a crushing wave of confusion. Why the look of utter devastation? Why the sudden withdrawal in his stance? "It is you," she whispered, stepping forward, the sapphire on her left hand suddenly feeling like a brand. "I knew you would come. He cut her off, his voice low and fiercely urgent. "You wear a ring?" He wasn't asking a question, he was stating an impossibility. His gaze was fixed not on her face, but on the glittering symbol of her engagement. I was engaged this morning. It was arranged." She stumbled over the words, the beautiful explanation of the night before now sounding hollow and weak. "I had no choice, but that is of no consequence, not now. We spoke of truth, of an honest connection. My father's decision changes nothing of what we shared." He laughed, a single, sharp sound utterly devoid of mirth, and stepped back as if scorched. "Changes nothing?" His voice was harsh, the velvet smoothness of midnight replaced by the abrasive sound of grinding stone. "It changes everything, Miss Sterling, for you have agreed to marry Ashworth, a man who, I assure you, stands on the opposite side of a line you do not even realize exists." Lila's brow furrowed. "I do not understand. Who are you, then? Tell me your name." He straightened to his full height, his composure returning, but it was a cold, impenetrable shield, far more terrifying than his earlier shock. "My name," he stated, the two words dropping between them like fatal cannonballs, "is Alexander Vance." The name landed in the quiet solitude of the gardens with the force of an explosion. Vance. The word was synonymous with her earliest memories of family friction, whispered accusations, and the dark cloud of ongoing legal battles. The Sterlings and the Vances, two ancient, powerful families in business, land ownership, and politics, locked in a bitter, decade-long feud that had festered from a simple property dispute into a full-scale, life-defining vendetta. They did not attend the same dinners. They did not share the same circles. They did not even exchange the simplest of courtesies. The Vances were, quite simply, the mortal enemy. Lila felt the blood drain from her face, leaving her chilled and nauseous. The man who had given her the most intoxicating, honest moment of her life was the son of her father's bitterest foe. "No," she whispered, shaking her head in a frantic denial. No, it cannot be. You cannot be one of them. I am, Miss Sterling, Alexander confirmed, his voice now dangerously soft, his gray eyes piercing her with a mixture of cold fury and aching pain. The very man your father spends his evenings scheming against, the man whose family is currently fighting yours over the deed to the entire Northern Valley, and the man who foolishly allowed a fleeting passion to blind him to the impossible truth, that there can be no common ground between a Sterling and a Vance. Lila felt the bitter taste of betrayal rise in her throat. The beautiful promise of the previous night, the sincerity, the immediate connection, the shared laughter, all of it was suddenly layered with a new, horrifying meaning. "Did you know?" she accused, her voice rising in a thin, trembling crescendo. "Did you know who I was at the ball? Was this some cruel jest, some maneuver in your family's endless rivalry?" Alexander's composure cracked, the pain flashing across his features. "God help me, no! I only knew your face, your name, just moments ago, when I saw you, my enchanting mystery, wearing the betrothal ring of my political rival's friend. My own anonymity was an honest attempt to find a moment of peace. My surprise, Miss Sterling, is greater than yours, and far more cruelly felt, because I now know I kissed the enemy." The revelation was a physical blow. Their passion, immediate, fierce, and entirely genuine, was now tainted by the brutal reality of their respective legacies. The midnight kiss, meant to be a beginning, was revealed to be an act of the highest treason against their own blood. They stood for a long, aching moment, separated by more than distance, by family history, by legal documents, and by the insurmountable wall of her sapphire ring. "We cannot speak of this again," Lila declared finally, gathering her shattered dignity. Her voice was firm, though her hands trembled in the folds of her gown. "The connection was real, but it is impossible. I am betrothed, and you are a Vance. We must forget the ball and everything that happened beneath the mask." She turned to walk away, to flee the devastating proximity of him. "You will not forget." Alexander's voice cut through the air, sharp and absolute. He moved with a sudden, predatory speed, seizing her arm, not cruelly, but with an uncompromising firmness. "Look at me, Lila." She was forced to meet his gaze. The storm gray of his eyes was not just angry, it was filled with a desperate, all-consuming desire. "Do you think a single conversation and a father's hasty arrangement can erase that night? I felt something with you that I have never felt in all my years, something true. You are my enemy, and yet you were the only person who has ever seen me clearly." He lowered his voice, dropping the hostility and injecting a plea that weakened her knees. "I will not stand by and watch you marry a man you do not love simply because our fathers are fools." "We have no choice," Lila cried, despair tearing at her control. "Our families would disown us. It would ruin us both." "Then we must meet in the shadows," he countered, his resolve hardening into steel. "We steal what happiness we can. We discover if that fire was merely a trick of the night or a truth powerful enough to burn down a decade of hatred. Meet me, Lila, not as Miss Sterling, the dutiful fiancée, but as the woman who kissed me at midnight." The danger was exhilarating. The promise was utter madness. To defy her father, her society, and her own engagement for a man whose name was anathema, it was suicide. And yet the alternative, a lifetime of polite indifference with Lord Ashworth, was a far greater death. "Where?" she managed, her voice barely audible. Alexander's eyes blazed with triumph. The old stone bridge in the North Park. 2 nights from now, at the stroke of 9. Tell no one. Lie to everyone. Lila, the well-bred, impeccably principled daughter of Mr. Sterling, found herself nodding. She was committing an act of treason against everything she knew, drawn by a connection so powerful it superseded all common sense. Over the next few weeks, a dangerous, secret courtship began. They met in shadowed parks at dusk, exchanging hurried, passionate words in the quiet safety of their shared lies. Alexander would wait beneath the canopy of ancient oaks, his coat blending with the gathering gloom, and Lila would slip away from dinner parties or claim sudden, convenient headaches. Their secret was a fragile, shimmering bubble constantly threatened by the watchful eyes of society. Eavesdropping servants, suspicious glances from Lila's younger cousin who constantly wondered where she disappeared to, and the ever-present, demanding presence of Lord Ashworth made their every meeting a thrilling, terrifying risk. Every shared kiss was an act of defiance, and every whispered confession cemented the reality. Their love was not a fairy tale. It was a fierce, hard-won truth born from fire and betrayal. They were lying to their world to preserve the only honest thing in it, each other. The tension grew tauter with every passing day, the weight of their respective family names pressing down upon their fragile secret, threatening to shatter it all into irreconcilable pieces. The trap was sprung during what Lila believed to be a final, desperate farewell before her wedding was irrevocably moved forward. Lord Ashworth had demanded a date be set for the following month. Lila was in Alexander's arms, standing beneath the skeletal branches of the ancient oak near the stone bridge. Their kisses had become more desperate, tinged with the devastating knowledge that their time was vanishing. "I cannot marry him, Alexander," Lila wept into the fabric of his coat, the lie of her life becoming physically unbearable. "I cannot endure a lifetime of indifference when I know this fire is real. Nor can I watch it happen." Alexander's voice was a ragged sound of pain and fury. "We must leave, Lila, tonight, before they conceal your fate. We can be married by dawn in Scotland, and let them fight over the wreckage." It was a reckless plan, utterly ruinous to their reputations, but for a split second, it tasted like freedom. The moment their lips met in a desperate, sealing kiss, the shadows exploded. "Vance!" The roar was her father's, Mr. Elias Sterling's, a terrifying sound of absolute paternal rage. He emerged from behind the shrubbery, his face purple with fury, flanked by a rigid, horrified Lady Eleanor, and, most devastatingly, by the pale and coldly furious Lord Ashworth. Alexander instantly shielded Lila, stepping forward, his powerful frame a barrier against her family's wrath. "Sterling," Alexander replied, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that mirrored the elder man's intensity. "You had no right to follow us." "I have every right to protect my daughter from a scheming scoundrel of your ilk. You vile parasite. This is your pathetic attempt to poison the Sterling name, is it not? To use my innocent girl as a pawn in your father's petty vendetta." Lila pushed past Alexander, her heart hammering against her ribs, but her mind suddenly clear. The shame was immense, but the opportunity was singular. "He is not using me, father, and I am not innocent," she cried out, forcing the truth into the night air. The shock on her father's face was total. "We love each other. We met without names, and we loved the people beneath the titles. I have refused to marry Lord Ashworth, and I refuse now to be traded like a piece of livestock just to satisfy your grudge against the Vance family." Lord Ashworth finally spoke, his voice ice-cold with wounded pride. "Lila, This is unseemly. A fit of hysteria. You will retract this statement, return to the carriage, and we shall proceed as arranged. This episode will be forgotten." Alexander seized Lila's hand, lacing his fingers through hers, a defiant, irrevocable gesture that cemented their unity. "She will not retract it. She is mine. I will not relinquish her to this convenient marriage or to the sterile war you two old fools have been fighting for a decade." The confrontation escalated into a chaotic storm of accusations. Mr. Sterling denounced Alexander as a libertine and a snake. Alexander countered by condemning Mr. Sterling's tyrannical control over his daughter's life. The family feud, which had simmered over land and tariffs, had now erupted violently over the forbidden love of their children. The exposure of their affair did not result in an immediate embrace or a swift acceptance. It resulted in ruin. Lila was confined to her rooms, the public shame threatening to consume the Sterling name. Alexander was summoned home and subjected to his own father's cold, white-hot fury. The families retreated to their separate estates, but the silence between them was explosive. The feud was no longer a business matter. It was a devastating personal tragedy. However, over the next agonizing week, something began to shift. The intense, unyielding resistance of the young lovers had a surprising effect. Alexander's father, a man of ruthless business acumen, found himself facing a son whose defiance was absolute. Mr. Sterling, equally prideful, was forced to confront the potential of utterly destroying his daughter's life, not by marrying her to a Vance, but by preventing her from having any future at all. The scandal of the affair was a permanent blight. The only way to salvage any honor and prevent Lila from becoming a social pariah was marriage. But to marry Ashworth now was unthinkable. The scandal would follow. It was Alexander who made the final, necessary move. He did not appeal to love, but to logic and survival. Alexander called for a formal, public meeting, a move of utter audacity, in a neutral solicitor's office. He walked in alone, facing Mr. Sterling, Lady Eleanor, and a grim-faced Lord Ashworth. "I am here not as a suitor, Mr. Sterling, but as a businessman," Alexander stated, his voice calm, steady, and entirely devoid of heat. "Lila and I are bound, whether by passion or by public scandal, is now irrelevant. The world knows. You can continue this path of enmity. You can destroy your daughter's reputation and secure your petty pride. Or you can use this catastrophe to your advantage." He laid out the proposal with brutal honesty. "Marry us. Join the Vance and Sterling names. We end the feud, merge the land interests, and consolidate the political power. You will gain a son-in-law whose business ambition rivals your own, and you will save your daughter's name. Otherwise, I promise you, I will marry her anyway, and we will watch as the Sterling family descends into the disgrace you worked so hard to prevent." It was a cold, calculated move, a final, necessary lie to disguise the truth, that their love was powerful enough to demand this ultimatum. Mr. Sterling looked at the young man, seeing not the arrogant boy who had courted his daughter, but a force as immovable and unyielding as himself. He saw the fire in Alexander's eyes, the passion that could either consume them or forge them into something stronger. After 3 days of brutal, protracted negotiations, a fierce battle not over the hearts of the children, but over the deeds, dowries, and contracts, a resolution was forced. It was not a joyous union born of blessings, but a hard-fought truce hammered out on the anvil of necessity. The wedding was small, rushed, and conducted under a cloud of tight-lipped disapproval. Lila did not look at her father, who stood rigid and pale until the very moment she was officially pronounced Mrs. Alexander Vance. Only then did she turn to her husband. Alexander's gaze was solemn, intense, and filled with a relief that was almost painful to witness. Their hands, which had been linked in public duty, now squeezed together in a private, unspoken vow. Their love had not been born from fairy tales. It had been born from a reckless midnight kiss, nurtured in the shadows of deceit, and finally cemented by fire and an uncompromising demand for truth. They had not merely fallen in love, they had forced their respective worlds to change, paying the price in public shame and familial strain. As they left the church, the air was still heavy with unresolved bitterness. The feud was officially over, but the healing had yet to begin. Yet Lila leaned her head against Alexander's shoulder, looking out at the cold, critical world with a fierce, quiet joy. The path ahead was strewn with obstacles, but for the first time in her life, she was walking it with the only man who had ever truly seen her. Their passion had been the painful, necessary catalyst for peace, and their fate, finally, was their own.